Okay, so today we're gonna go over how to paint over stain trim with as little sanding as possible. So here I have my stain trim, and we're gonna show you the proper way of painting over that stain trim in order to get a nice finish. I will also show you how to highlight some of the detail so it can pop a little bit more. We will go over all the materials and supplies that you're gonna need to get this job done right. The first thing to do before we start painting is really to get the area cleaned as much as possible. This TSP really pulls out that grease and that grime, and it's important that you do that. So you can see I have the TSP in here. I'm just using a rag to go ahead and clean that trim. Very important that we clean this really well. So here you can see the water after I use the TSP and I clean the trim. This is in the kitchen. You can see how it's really dirty. Sometimes you're looking at the trim, you don't think that there's grease, but believe me, there's grease. And you can see here the difference between the dirty water and the clean water that we started off with. So it's very important to remove that grease. The more prep work you do, the more cleaning you do, the better the paint and the primer will grab. After cleaning, I like to use a sand and deglosser to go over the trim and basically dull it up. I also will use a sanding block in certain areas. A lot of videos will tell you that you don't have to use a sanding block, but I like to go over the trim just lightly. And again, the more prep work you do on the trim, the better the paint will grab and the better finish you're gonna have. That's why I like to use this sanding block. But after I use the sanding block, I'll go ahead and use the deglosser to really remove the sheen from the stain trim. So you want to go ahead and use the deglosser like this. If you have a sponge, you can put it on a sponge. It's probably a little bit better. But this is what the deglosser does. It basically gets it ready for primer and paint. A lot of people say that you don't have to sand. I like to sand a little bit sometimes. Depending on what it is, but if you're gonna use the deglosser, make sure you use a lot of deglosser and really get it in there. So we have our stain trim here that's been cleaned with TSP. It's been wiped down with the deglosser to get rid of that glossy finish that the trim has. And now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and use our primer over the stain trim. Not only did I use the deglosser on this, but I did sand it a little bit with a sanding block. And I like doing that just because it roughs off the surface a little bit more for the primer to grab. And a lot of videos on YouTube, they'll tell you that you don't have to sand this, you could just use a deglosser. It's kind of true, but the more you sand, the better it is. So if you sand it, the more you do sand it, the better the primer is going to grab, the better the paint is going to grab. So now we're going to go ahead and use our primer and sealer. As you can see, this is a stain block and primer, and this is what you need in order to prime over stained trim. So you can see we're just going to go ahead and prime it. Now that we applied our deglosser, and this is prime, you don't want to go too crazy with it. You know, you just want enough for the paint to grab onto. So while you're doing this too, it's a good time now to patch up any little holes that you have. So you want to patch it up first before you put the primer. So over here on our column, you can see I already applied some of the primer. I do have to lightly sand this, just very lightly, to get rid of imperfections such as these right here. I like to go ahead and use a sanding block just to go over it lightly, just like that, just to get rid of any imperfection that you may find here, just very lightly. That way the paint will grab on even better. You can see I got rid of that imperfection that was there just by sanding it very lightly. You get rid of that. So once you're happy with the sanding that you did, you want to go ahead and remove all that dust from the sanding. As you can see here, there's some dust. You basically just want to go ahead and remove it with a brush here before you paint it. You can see all that dust on the tape here. See it right there? So you want to make sure that's not on the surface that you're going to paint, because if that's on the surface that you're going to paint, the paint is not going to stick to it. So while you're painting, to get the best result and to get the least amount of streaks in your paint as possible, you really got to use some Floetrol. And with the Floetrol, you got to be careful, especially on the darker paints, that it is going to change a little bit. It's going to lighten it up because this is white, the Floetrol. But I use a little bit of Floetrol, read the directions, and then it's very important that you have the right brush. In this case, I'm using Purdy, and these brushes are really good. They're a little bit expensive, but they're going to help you with that streak-free finish that you're looking for. I also use a foam roller in certain areas, and I recommend that you get a nice foam roller for this job. Another very important thing is the paint, and here I'm using a Pro Classic paint from Sherwin-Williams. This is what they call their cabinet paint. It's going to last long. You really got to make sure that you get the right paint for the job, and that's going to make a world of difference. So as you can see, certain areas I will use the brush, and again, this is a good brush. This is a Purdy brush. In certain areas it makes more sense to use a brush, and then in other areas it makes more sense to use the foam roller. Again, the prep work that you do before painting and the quality of supplies that you get does make a difference. You can see the brush really allows you to get in there where the roller wouldn't be able to. I'm also using this glaze that you see here to make some of the detail areas pop a little bit. I'm not going to go into too much detail on the edge glazing, but I do have a video on my channel that covers this a little bit more in detail. After the edge glazing, you do have to use a water-based clear, or you could just basically spray it on in order to protect that glaze. Here you see the finished result, and really all comes down to the prep that you do in the beginning. And by the way, this is the same method that I used on my kitchen cabinets about 3 years ago, and you can tell that they're in really good shape. It's been holding up for 3 years, like I said, with no problems. I did do the glaze edging on here, and then I did hit it up with a clear coat. You can see it's nice and shiny, and the clear coat basically is helping it to preserve and protect it. And basically when I did these cabinets, I followed the same method that I did when I did the trim here. These were all stained, and I went ahead and cleaned them up, used a deglosser, sand them a little bit, primed it, and then painted. Put the glazing on, and then the last thing, the top coat, was a clear coat. Same thing here with my kitchen island. The same method was applied, and you can see how well it's holding up. And you can see I did do the kitchen cabinets to match all my trim that was previously stained. And if you want to know how I did these kitchen cabinets, how I painted them, how I sanded them, they were stained before, and how I took them from being stained to painted, you can check out my channel. I have a video there that I posted a while back, and you can go ahead and watch the project from start to finish.